YouTube, we are back today with an updated deck profile for MirageGaogamon. This is a deck that I personally always will have fun playing and did have the pleasure of topping a in-person regional with it. So the dog will always hold a special place in my heart. You know, in my opinion, the deck itself is still very strong, and it does epitomize the blue archetype in general with its, multitude of access to mechanics like bounce, unsuspend, Bukamon giving it jamming. I think the dog is sitting in a very good spot. It gets a lot of nice support pieces in BT14, and despite one of its sort of core pieces being limited to one in EX4 Gaogamon, it's still pulling a lot of good and strong results. It claimed multiple top 16 spots in the most recent in-person regionals over in LA this past weekend or past couple of weekends ago. So I really do think Mirage is in a very good spot. It's still very strong. Yes, it's going to get limited in March, but I think between now and then, we're still going to be seeing it around. So, as with our previous deck discussions, we're going to start by going over my ratios and my, sort of tech choices. Then we'll delve into more of a discussion on how I personally pilot the deck, what my playstyle is like with it, and how I tend to sort of read my board state. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy it. We can't say this enough, but thank you all for tuning in. The growth and support recently really does mean a lot to us. So really huge thank you for those returning and always tuning into our videos. For those checking us out for the first time, welcome to our channel. We really hope you like what you have to see and can keep tuning in and, continuing on in this journey with us. The links to our socials as well as our TCG player affiliate will be in the video description down below, along with a photo of the deck list itself. Let me know what you all think. Let me know what you think could, help improve the deck. Hope you guys enjoy it. And without further ado, let's hop right into the deck profile. Alrighty guys, so we're going to start off with the eggs. I think this one's going to be pretty straightforward for y'all. Just for Bukamon, at this point in time, blue really doesn't have a reason to run any other egg. Bukamon giving jamming is just so good, and with Mirage doing what it does with now Source Strip with some new pieces that we'll see and talk about in a little bit, as well as the bounce mechanic, really no other egg to play. Jamming is going to be a very easy condition to meet. Moving on to the rookies, we're going to run 4 of the BT11 Searcher Gaomons. Lets you cycle top 3, pick up a card with Gaogamon in name as well as a blue tamer. Do note that if you do end up not picking up something, you do have to trash what you don't pick up. It's not like you can bottom deck them. It's a little weird. I still don't know why they chose to do that, but they did choose to say trash the rest. So just keep that in mind. The inheritables sometimes will pop up, being able to balance a level 3 back to your opponent's hand. Sometimes is applicable, but I think most of the times you're using it either just for search or just to digivolve in the back. Next rookie we're going to run is 4 of the EX4 Gaomon. This little guy is really good, both in the early and the late game. Early game, he's great to just digivolve in the back for because it's inheritable of gaining a memory every time an opponent gains a card to hand during your turn is really good. In the late game, he can be a sneaky way to help push your opponent over that threshold of 8 cards in hand. If you hard slam it for 3 with all the memory that you gain, you can force your opponent to draw a card, which either can proc an unsuspend effect, or if you push them above 8, allows you to proc, burst modes when attacking effect again. So, Gaomon, this one I think is pretty good and pretty versatile. And the last thing that we're going to sprinkle in here is the new BT14 Gomamon. As you may have seen in my previous deck video earlier on from the channel, I did run 3 Vmon from BT11 before for additional tamer search, but I really like Gomamon here because it does a couple of things. First of all, it makes your stack unblockable for the turn, which if you're able to build straight from a level 3 and get into a level 6, which with your trainings and your boosts is definitely a possibility, your stack won't be able to be blocked. And second of all, when you push up, you do get to strip a source from something, which helps synergize very well with the Bukamon and helping you kind of achieve that sort of criteria for jamming. And then on deletion, you just spit out a Gomamon to just help with board presence too, right? I think a lot of BT14 is board presence and being able to exert pressure on your opponent's board state. So even if you do lose your Mirage, being able to spit out a Gomamon in return and either have your opponent deal with it, or if it does survive, you have a level 3 ready to go next turn is really, really good value. So that's why we run 3 of it, and it's I think a really good replacement for the VMons that I had before. Moving on to the level 4s, we'll start off with 2 Kumamon. Hybrid for game is a very viable strat still, particularly with how much you're swinging and being able to just get through security. You know, you can easily just Kuma at the end game to just go for game. Especially if your opponent is smart about playing around that sort of like 8 cards in hand sort of thing, or you just run out of ways to put cards in their hand, Kuma can come up clutch. The reason I'm running Kuma as opposed to Lanamon is the fact that, you know, Kuma when digivolving does strip a source, so it does help kind of cheeky ways to lower the amount of sources under opponent's stack to help proc the jamming effect of Bukamon. So that's the reason I picked Kuma over Lana, but I think Lana is still a really, really good choice. Moving on to other level 4s, we're going to be running 4 of the BT13 Gaogamon and 4 of the EX4 Gaogamon. I think both are really, really good level 4s for this deck. This guy pairs, the BT13 one pairs very, very well with the Searcher Gaomon. A nice play that you can do, like if you're going first, right, is to play out a Gaomon. If you're able to hit either a Tamer or this guy, it's good value because more often than not, this little guy will live, and then subsequent turn, you can go ahead and Digivolve into Gaogamon, play out a Thomas for free, which is high value, and now you have a level 4 on the board where you can just swing for chip damage, you can go into level 5 or whatever. So really good value there. This guy is kind of good for like intermittent board control or intermediate board control. You know, being able to balance a level 3 can get rid of pesky memory setters, whatnot. So I think still good value. And then this guy gives you memory if something is bounced as an inheritable. So pairs very well with this Gaomon over here. If you have both of these in your inheritables, you bounce something with your MirageGaogamon, you're gaining 2 additional memory on top of the inherent memory that Mirage will give you. So I think really, really good spread for level 4s. In terms of level 5s, we're going to start off with 3 of the BT11 Gaogamon. This is the one that when digivolving gives you blocker and plus 2k for every 4 cards in your opponent's hand. I think pretty good, you know, especially nowadays where there are times where you want your Mirage to DP climb and have a little bit more DP. So this allows you to kind of search for that. Having a blocker on the board isn't always going to be viable because, again, there are ways to de-digivolve, delete, and get rid of the stack. But having a big blocker on board is just something that your opponent will have to deal with. So I think it's pretty good. A consideration I did have was running the EX4 Gaogamon, which doesn't allow attacks to be redirected during that turn. I think it's a good card. I just like the DP climb a little bit better. Their inheritables are the same, you know, which is all turns when an effect adds a card to your opponent's hand, you can restand this Digimon. They have the same inheritable. I just, like I said, I like the DP climb and blocker effect a little bit more. Next, we're running 1 of the limited Gaogamon. He is, in all honesty, probably the best level 5 that Mirage had prior to BT14, so I see why they maybe chose to limit it, being able to bounce to level 4 and then have the inheritable for when attacking. You know, if your opponent has 8 or more cards in hand, you can restand. Again, is a little bit easier to achieve than this, and pairs, again, very, very well with burst modes when attacking effect, so you can restand a lot of different ways with this card. So again, I see why they did it, but I just felt like it was a little unnecessary. But topic for another day. And the last level 5 we're going to be running is 3 of the new Zudo Aces. I think Zudo Ace pairs really, really nicely with this deck. You know, being able to, when digivolving, strip 2 sources and bounce something that doesn't have a source. In a meta that likes to wideboard and spit out a lot of small end bodies, This guy can really just make this deck purr. You know, pair this with Gaogamon and Gaomon's inheritables. You're gaining so much memory, you know, you're making your play so much more efficient, and efficiency helps you get to your OTK play. So I really like Zudo Ace. Also, just being able to just hard slam him and then put out a Mirage just so that it's easier to get into. And yes, you can't swing with it, but now at that point, you've essentially possibly been able to clear board with how much bounce you can do with those two cards. I think it's just really, really good value. So if I can find a way to run him at a 4 of, I would try to, but deck space is relatively tight with this, so I'm opting to run him at a 3. But like I said, I think really, really good addition to this card. Only downside I would say is that it's not like, it doesn't have Gao in name, so it's not really searchable. But you are running enough boosts and trainings where you can find it if you need it. Moving on to the level 6s, we're going to start off just with one of the BT13 MirageGaogamon. I honestly am really running this as a sort of like Hail Mary option. If I have the choice to go between BT11 Mirage and this Mirage, I'm more often than not going into BT11 Mirage. It's a hands down choice. But being able to bounce a Tamer can come up, particularly with decks like Fenrir Luga, you know, D-Brigade sometimes as well, who are a little bit more Tamer reliant. This can come up. And it is also an additional Mirage target, right? Like if you're missing your BT11 Mirages for whatever reason, this does give you an additional sort of modality to get into burst mode if you have to. So that's why I run it at a 1 of. You know, I think you can make a case to run it as a 2 of, but I think, again, with how tight the deck is, I prefer to just run it at a 1 of, because you're really focusing on trying to get into BT11 Mirage, which is this guy. Like I said, just hands down one of the best, if not the best, level 6 that Blue has access to right now. When digivolving, being able to bounce a level 5, or if they don't have a level 5 or below in play, bouncing the top card of their security to hand is just so good. You know, you're guaranteed to gain some memory off of this card. So yes, it's a 4 cost to Evo, but with how much memory you're gaining with your inheritables and being able to gain a memory for every 4 cards your opponent has in play is really, really good. Even if you don't go into burst mode that turn, keeping him out as like a floodgate is also extremely annoying for your opponent to have to deal with, right? Because think about it, with decks like Fenrir Luga, Yellow Vaccine, D-Brigade, all of these decks, what do they need to do? They need to add and cycle, add cards and cycle again and again and again. This guy just feasts on it, right? The more they do that, it's just free memory, man. Just free memory for you to do what you want to do. And you tax them for playing the game. You know, so I really think this guy is so good, particularly in today's meta. Just such a good top end. You know, and speaking of top ends, we run 3 of the burst mode. Really good when attacking effect. It's not a once per turn, so being able to just swing, unsuspend, and go for OTK is really what you want to do with this deck. So I don't run it at a 4 of, just because I thought 4 was a little bit clunky. You do draw enough in this deck, and you have a lot of search modalities where I think 3 is more than enough. You really only want to see 3 because by the time you go into it, your goal is to have the chance to be going for game. You know, you don't really want to hard evo into it unless you really have to. There are certain situations where that can come up. I did have to do that a couple times at regionals when I did play this deck to good effect, but you know, other than that, most of the times you are burst evoing it. And that does round it out for our Digimon. We're gonna do 3 of the BT4 Thomas and 3 of the BT13 Thomas. BT4 Thomas I think is really good in the sense that, again, on play you draw 1, so really good sort of early play tamer just to get early card advantage and helps you just restand your Digimon. You know, with jamming, especially nowadays too, even if you don't have your stack, right, you can easily just push up with a level 4 or a level 5, swing with jamming. If you have a Thomas in play, you can just suspend, restand it to keep it alive so that you can guarantee your opponent doesn't swing into it. You can also just go for more aggression and swing again with jamming. So do 2 checks with 1 stack if it lives. So I think really good value early game. This guy is helpful more like mid to late game to give you that memory cushion to go into like BT11 Mirage, and helps you find ways to add cards to your opponent's hand, because when you attack with something with Gao in name, you can just suspend the Tamer to have both players draw a card. So that procs a lot of your, when an effect adds cards to your opponent's hand effects, right? So really good for late game synergy. Moving on to our option cards, we do run 4 of the new mental training. The training cards in general are just absolutely cracked for any deck in Digimon right now. Being able to reduce the Digivolution cost as well as search, all for a 2 cost, is almost like Cool Boy on crack. Like it's just so good. Like, and especially with this deck where you kind of want to just turbo into your top end and just end the game. The mechanics of the top end is suffocating enough. Being able to turbo into it is just so much better, right? And being able to search and not bottom deck Tamers, being able to pick up cards like Zudo Ace or Gomamon as well with this is just really high value just for a 2 cost. We do run 2 memory boosts as well for additional search and just memory gain. As memory efficient as this deck is, sometimes you do have that specific scenario where you need that extra memory to pull off a play, so I can see why boost is still very helpful. I do have a little caution with it because you don't want to bottom deck any of these guys, right? Because if you do, sometimes that can hurt. So, I still say I like the training better, but there are definitely reasons to run at least 2 of boost for sure. And then we do end it up with 2 Sorai. I really like Sorai because being able to potentially just stop your opponent from swinging, particularly in a wide board format, I still think has really high value. Being able to strip 4 sources also has high value, takes away a lot of potential inheritables and unsuspend plays like Fenrir Luga, etc. So I think having that ability to strip sources and shut your opponent down for the turn out of security is really good. Being able to play this out in anticipation of either a wide board play or sort of a rush play is also really nice. And it's only going to get better, as we start to see Anubis start to come into play once EX5 comes around. So I'm opting for Sorai as opposed to cards like Full Moon Meteor or Kakaitis Breath or whatever, just because I like that source strip aspect. I can definitely see reasons to run, the Full Moon Meteor. If I remember correctly, and back check me on this one, a lot of the regional topping decks ran the Full Moon at a 2 of, so it obviously works. But the way I like to play, I'm running just 2 of the Sorai. And that does round out the deck. We, like I said, the deck profile or photo, the finalized photo will be in the video description down below. And without further ado, let's hop right into the deck discussion. Alrighty guys, so let's talk about what Mirage as a deck wants to do. I still, like I've said before, it has and epitomizes everything that Blue wants to do in a deck, which is a lot of bouncing, a lot of unsuspending, utilizing the jamming mechanic to be able to swing in without really worrying about your DP. And it's also the first Blue deck, in my opinion, to kind of incorporate the sort of OTK sort of style of play. Imperial, to a degree, did have that aggression and that gas, but Mirage's win con, honestly, is an OTK. So I think, being able to set that up is going to be very important, both in the early and the late game. Your goal with this deck should be, start off with some early pokes, use your mid-level, like 4s and 5s to control the board state, and be able to keep building in the back until you can set up your lethal turn. Like I said, you really want to utilize your bounce mechanic as well as your tamer effects to increase your opponent's hand size to help maximize the efficiency of your top end plays. Now, what you want to see in a starting hand, as with any sort of big stack OTK deck, you want to be able to start off with a rookie almost right away. If you don't see a rookie, then you would want to see either a searcher, such as like the mental trainings or a blue memory boost that I'm running. Seeing a Thomas early is also very helpful. I'm okay seeing both, in all honesty. I think if you're having to hard slam one, Sometimes early game, the 3-cost Thomas is a little bit better because it does allow you to just draw one on play. The memory setter Thomas is nice to set up sort of in the middle of the game where, you know, it's helpful to maybe like either choke your opponent to 1, give yourself that memory kind of cushion so that when you do go into your top end, you have a little bit to work with. But like I said, in all honesty, seeing either in your starting hand is okay. The most vital piece is going to be a rookie. Of all the rookies, I think I probably would prefer to see the BT11 Gaomon as a starting piece just because it is versatile in the sense of if your hand is sort of mucked up and bricked, you can just hard slam it for 3 and cycle through to pick up some pieces. Otherwise, you can just straight up Digivolve it in the back. And that's typically what I like to see in a starting hand. Obviously, that doesn't always happen. So if I don't see the rookie, I do want my pieces that will allow me to search and cycle through my deck. Now, what to do it like in like turns, say 1 through 3. Like I said, it's totally okay to throw a searcher down. Sometimes I will do that like turn 2. If I'm able to start building my stack in the back, but I'm missing either like my top end, a level 5, or a tamer, I'll try to throw down the BT11 Gaomon to help look for pieces. Otherwise, I'll try to put down either a training or a memory boost to help find my pieces and gain me some early memory manipulation later on. It's helpful to be able to get 1 to 2 swings at security for early chip damage. Not because you need it with the Mirage OTK play, but it does help because, you know, you're not as reliant on your final combo play to get through like 5 or 6 security, right? Like it's always nicer to say like, let me get 1 or 2 pokes in so that when you do go into your OTK play, it's sort of a guaranteed finisher. And I will also say this too, you know, don't be afraid to throw down your searcher and then Digivolve and try to build a stack that way too. Mirage is nice in the sense that your level 4s and your level 5s all have pretty good when Digivolving effects. You know, your level 4s either will play out a tamer or bounce an opponent's piece to hand. Your level 5s can also have the capability to bounce as well as give you DP boost. So if your opponent hasn't dealt with a stack that's on the field early, don't be afraid to just build out. You know, but that being said, typically I will try to keep in the back and stay in raising while I build my stack, just because there's so many ways for removal, Digivolve, and again, like bouncing as well, DP reduction that will cause your stack to be hit and hit early on. You know, not unlike your X antibody stacks, these level 4s and level 5s don't have any protection, so they are very vulnerable if they're left out in raising. So that's why I will typically build in the back, but I'm okay with the tools that I have to build out as well. Now, talking about the OTK play here, right? Like I've said before, your level 5 typically is staying in back. And once I get into my level 5, it's not like next turn I immediately push it out, right? If I'm able to get into my level 5, say like turn 2 or turn 3, the next focus that I usually will do is to play out my tamers or play out like a memory boost or whatever to help find either a burst mode or another piece to the puzzle that I'll need to string over my OTK play. So usually, like I said, the level 5 stays in back. You try to set up like 1 or 2 Thomases to help with your burst mode plays. And then when you're ready, you can then push out. By the time you push out, it's probably your best bet to go into BT11 MirageGaogamon. BT13 Mirage is more of a defensive option. I typically will use BT11 MirageGaogamon for my sort of lethal play, just because its Twin Digivolving effect and all turns effect is just so good. It's probably one of the best top ends for blue right now. So you go into BT11 MirageGaogamon, you bounce something back to hand, whether it's top of the opponent's security or level 5 on the board. And now with Bukamon in play, more often than not, you will have jamming. So you can go ahead, swing with jamming. At that point, the hope is that you utilize either a level 5 inheritable effect or a Thomas effect to help restand your MirageGaoga. By restanding it, this gives you a couple options, right? If you want to kind of get greedy and swing again one more time and restand with a Thomas, that's fine. But typically, I will go straight into burst mode, bounce back a Thomas, and play it out again. Burst modes, when Digivolving effect, is also so busted in the sense that you gain more memory. So you gain more memory, and then you can just kind of utilize burst modes when attacking effect to keep swinging, bringing cards to your opponent's hand, trashing until they hit 8, and then do it all over again until you can go for game, right? That's sort of the idea behind the OTK play. BT14 really accelerated that with Bukamon. Now you kind of don't care what you're swinging into. Before, you kind of had to worry a little bit. Now you're like, I've got jamming. I can just keep swinging, right? So, you know, the strengths to the deck, now that we've talked about its big combo play, is there's a lot of bounce, a lot of memory manipulation, which is sort of the bread and butter of what blue likes to do. And in all honesty, I think bounce is still a very, very strong mechanic. You know, now, especially now in BT14, we're not seeing a lot of black war gray floating around just because there's a lot more consistency in decks. And those decks do take a little bit of time to set up. So we're not seeing a lot of the Greymon X protection, which prevents bounce from being a thing. So we're seeing bounce being a lot more powerful against decks like Fenry, Yellow Vaccine. Deep Brigade does have a little bit of protection built into it, but it does help control the board state to a little bit more of a manageable state. You know, and that OTK play is still very, very devastating. You know, there have been multiple times where I've either played with Mirage or played against Mirage, and that OTK swing where they're swinging, restanding, and at the same time taking cards away from your hand is just so debilitating. Because even if they can't finish off that OTK and they end up dying into something in security or whatever, by that time they've probably kind of mucked around your hand by trashing randomly that you're left in a very difficult spot, you know, and they've pretty much wiped your entire board at that point as well. So you're left in a state where you're just playing catch up, even if they don't finish off that OTK play, and they're in a very, very good position. You know, and lastly, blue has just a ton of access to very, very good tech cards. You've got cards like Sorai, Ice Wall, Zudo Ace. You know, I'm not running this card, but, you know, the Full Moon Meteor Blast, which is a very good removal card. Essentially a power-crept Kakaitis Breath that synergizes very, very well with Mirage as a deck. So having access to those option cards in a meta that, you know, sort of depends on security giving you a little bit of removal is super, super helpful. Now, where I see the deck struggle is the common theme or the common problem that we see in all these OTK decks, which is the brick, right? If you don't find your pieces, you're essentially out of the game. Mirage is a little bit more flexible in the sense that there are some plays that you can string along and still maintain some level of board presence with your level 5s and your level 4s. But even then, it's very, very difficult to compete with, you know, a deck that it's finding all its pieces if you're bricking, you know. So as with all OTK decks, if you brick, you're in a tough spot. Like I've mentioned before, the deck does not have protection, so it is very vulnerable to option cards, very vulnerable to removal that's either hidden security or if your opponent just hard played something. Doesn't have protection against DP reductions, so Yellow Vaccine can also run a little bit of a muck on it too. So there are ways to deal with it. You can kind of call it a glass cannon in a sense. So like I said, when it hits off, it's very, very powerful, but it does suffer from some of the OTK issues that, you know, we see generally. But that is the deck profile, guys. You know, let me know what you guys think. Like I said, I still think that this is, one, a very, very strong deck, and two, just a very, very fun deck to play. You know, if you really enjoy blue or you want to know what blue is all about, I think this is the deck to check out. It does, like I said, it does everything that blue wants to do, with the bonus of the fact that the combo play is an OTK play, you know, and if you're doing the thing, you're probably going for game very, very shortly. So really recommend this deck. I think it's still going to be very, very good. If you're going to LA, playing in nationals, playing in side events, expect to see a couple of Mirage here and there. It's still going to be around. But like I said, let me know what you guys think of my profile. Let me know what you guys would change up, what you would do differently, how maybe you would pilot it differently as well. We always love the interaction from you guys as a community. It's what drives us to get better, you know, both as Digimon players as well as a community. So keep pushing us, keep asking more of us. We want to provide for you guys. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.